The afternoon sun poured down on a modest suburban neighborhood just outside Laredo, Texas. It was a sleepy Saturday in June 2011, warm and familiar, and the Richardson family's backyard buzzed with the laughter of children. Balloons danced in the breeze, and folding tables sagged under bowls of chips and colorful paper plates. It was Tommy Richardson's 8th birthday, and as generations of neighbors had done before, the community had come together to celebrate. Ava Marlowe stood near the garden fence, adjusting her wide-brimmed sun hat. At 60, she still carried an elegance, though her posture bore the weight of a sorrow no mother should ever have to carry. Fine lines framed her eyes that had spent the last 3 decades scanning crowds, always hoping, never finding. Beside the grill, her husband, William Bill Marlowe, chatted with a few of the men, flipping burgers and sipping sweet tea. He was 62 and had aged with the quiet resilience of a man who had lived through heartbreak and learned to wear it like a second skin. Eva smiled politely, half listening as her neighbor Maggie rambled on about tomato vines and pesky beetles. But her attention shifted in an instant when she noticed movement near the patio door. A man she didn't recognize stepped into the yard holding the hand of a young boy, no older than 8. "Sorry we're late," the man called out casually. "Had a little situation at home." Before he could say more, the boy wriggled free and ran toward the other kids. As he darted past her, Eva's breath caught. He wore green checkered overalls with bright yellow straps, exactly like the ones her boys had worn. The same pattern, the same color, even the same long-sleeve shirt underneath. His dark curls bounced as he moved, and for a second, time warped. Eva's heart slammed against her chest. Without a word, she stepped forward, faster than she knew she could move. Her hand landed gently on the boy's shoulder, turning him around. "Where did you get those clothes?" she asked, her voice barely more than a breath. Her fingers hovered toward his curls, trembling with the ghost of memory. The boy's eyes widened. In an instant, he pulled away and bolted for his father. "Daddy, Daddy," he cried, his voice sharp with fear. The man looked up, alarmed, and moved swiftly toward his son, placing a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. "Is everything okay?" he asked, wary but not yet angry. His voice held curiosity, but his stance was guarded. "She touched me," the boy blurted out, clinging to his father's side. "She scared me." The father's eyes narrowed slightly. "Ma'am, what's going on? Why did you grab my son?" Eva opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her gaze was fixed on the boy's clothes. Her hand lifted, stopping just shy of touching the fabric again. "Those overalls, where did you get them?" "Excuse me," the man said, stepping in front of his son, his tone sharpened. "What's your problem, lady?" Before Eva could explain, Bill appeared at her side, having sensed something was wrong. He slipped an arm protectively around her shoulders and looked from the man to the frightened boy. "I'm sorry," Bill said calmly, though his fingers gripped her shoulder tighter than usual. "My wife didn't mean to scare anyone." He glanced down at the boy, and his expression changed. "Those clothes," he said quietly, "our sons wore outfits just like that. Green overalls, yellow straps, long sleeves, identical." The man blinked, confusion softening into something closer to compassion. "Our boys were triplets," Bill added, his voice thicker now. "They disappeared in 1981. We never found out what happened." A hush fell over the yard. Neighbors turned quietly, listening. Mrs. Richardson stepped forward, her voice gentle. "It's true," she said. "The Marlowe boys were taken from this neighborhood. It was devastating. Everyone searched for weeks." The man looked down at his son, then back at Bill. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear. I bought these at a department store months ago. I can't remember which one." Eva stepped closer, her voice trembling, but clear. "Please, may I see the tag? I just need to know if it's the same brand." Bill gently placed a steady hand on his wife's shoulder. "Of a sweetheart," he said softly. "That's a little bomb. He's not Liam. He's not Nathan or Gage. Let's not frighten him more than we already have." Turning to the man, Bill gave a sincere nod. "I'm sorry, my wife didn't mean any harm. It's been a hard day." Mrs. Richardson, ever the thoughtful neighbor, stepped in gently, placing her hand on Eva's arm. "Eva, dear, you're shaking. Maybe it's best if you went home and got some rest." Bill offered her a grateful smile. "Yes, I think that's a good idea. Thank you for everything." He looked at the father and son, extending a respectful hand. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. I'm Ryan, the man said, taking Bill's hand. This is my son, Mason. We just moved in 3 blocks over. I'm truly sorry if we caused any distress. I thought coming to the party would be a nice way to meet the neighborhood. It's not your fault, Bill replied quickly. Really? With that, he gently guided Eva out of the backyard. The warm breeze rustled through the trees as they made the quiet walk home, only 3 blocks away, but each step felt heavier than the last. Inside, Bill helped her to the couch, then disappeared into the kitchen. The kettle whistled minutes later, and he returned with a cup of tea, the steam curling into the silence between them. He helped her lift it to her lips, his hand beneath hers. Eva's eyes brimmed with tears. I didn't mean to scare that little boy, she whispered. When I saw those clothes. Bill nodded gently, sitting beside her. I know. It was a panic attack. You couldn't help it. I can't let go, Bill, she said, her voice cracking under the weight of grief that had never faded. Even after 30 years, I still see them everywhere. Bill took her hand and held it tightly. They'd be grown now, he said, all 3 of them. Men with lives of their own, maybe families, jobs. I know, Eva whispered, staring into the distance. And I still talk about them like they're just away. I must sound foolish, always making people uncomfortable, clinging to ghosts. Bill shook his head. You're not foolish. You're their mother, and I felt it too when I saw that boy. The overalls, the green plaid, the yellow straps. It was like being hit by a memory we didn't ask for. Eva slowly sat up, her eyes searching his. I want to see the photos again, the ones where they're wearing those outfits. Bill hesitated. They're still in the attic. We haven't opened that box in over 20 years. Please, Eva said, her voice clear now. Maybe if I see them again, I'll calm down. Oh. Bill sighed but nodded. All right, I'll get it. She listened as his footsteps disappeared up the stairs, then the soft creak of the attic ladder. Moments passed, the sound of cardboard sliding. Then he returned, carefully carrying a worn box, its edges dulled with time, its surface blanketed in dust. He placed it on the coffee table and wiped it clean with an old kitchen towel. Together they lifted the lid. Inside were the fragile remains of a life interrupted. Tiny toys, a trio of baseball gloves, and 3 matching stuffed bears with faded fur. There were sheets of schoolwork marked with gold stars, drawings of rockets and rainbows. Each piece a frozen moment from a childhood cut painfully short. The photo album should be at the bottom, Bill said, his voice catching. We packed it last. Layer by layer, they lifted the relics of the past, and then finally the leather-bound book emerged. Bill's hands trembled slightly as he placed it on his lap. The cover, once deep brown, was now softened to a warm amber from years of handling, though it hadn't been opened in decades. Side by side, they sat on the sofa as he opened it. The first page held the beginning of everything. 3 identical newborns swaddled in striped blankets, sleeping side by side in a hospital bassinet. Then came photos of them crawling in unison, toddlers taking their first wobbly steps across the living room carpet, birthday parties captured in flickering light, with 3 tiny faces blowing out candles together in perfect synchrony. And then they turned the page. They were always so in sync, Eva whispered, her finger lightly tracing across a photograph of the boys building a sandcastle, sunlight sparkling off the waves behind them. Their small hands worked in tandem, 3 little architects shaping their kingdom of sand. Laughter frozen in the grainy texture of the image. Bill turned the pages with reverence, and they paused at each one, letting memories wash over them like warm waves. Trips to the park, sticky faces from melted popsicles, a trio of birthdays celebrated with matching cakes and identical candles. Then they found it, the photo they had been searching for. The triplets stood proudly in front of the old white house, shoulder to shoulder, in their green checkered overalls with bright yellow straps. Their long-sleeved shirts peeked out from beneath the fabric. And all 3 wore the same broad, beaming smile, the kind that only childhood could conjure. Arms linked, they looked unbreakable, invincible. Bill's voice broke the silence. This was taken the morning they disappeared, just 1 hour before they were gone. Yava leaned closer, studying the fabric with renewed focus. Look, she said, eyes narrowing. The overalls, they're similar to what that boy wore at the party, but not the same. The green is darker, more vintage, and the checkered pattern is wider. Bill nodded. And the straps. His were thinner, different stitching, well, same style, but definitely not the same garment. Eva sighed deeply, rubbing her eyes. I feel awful about how I reacted to that boy. I must have scared that poor child. I just couldn't help it. They fell into a quiet rhythm again, gazing at the photo that had once been so ordinary, now carrying the weight of unspeakable loss. Bill chuckled softly as Eva recalled how Gage had insisted on wearing his overalls backward that morning, proudly declaring he was cooler that way until she coaxed him into switching them, and how Nathan had somehow found a mud puddle before breakfast and stained his knee. Typical Nathan, Bill whispered. As Bill poured himself another cup of tea, Eva suddenly jolted forward, poking his arm and nearly causing him to spill. Bill, look at the background, she said urgently, pointing at the far corner of the photograph. Isn't that the Cadillac, the one Liam was obsessed with? Bill sat down the teapot and squinted at the image. Just behind the boys, barely in frame, was the gleaming front end of a reddish-brown Cadillac parked across the street. The shape was unmistakable. You're right, he murmured, his brow tightening. Liam loved that car. Every time we passed it, he'd beg me to stop so he could look inside. He even had a toy version of it. That's Mr. Henry Foster's Cadillac, Eva said, her voice rising. Their old school teacher, remember? He barely drove it, said it was his pride and joy. Bill nodded slowly, his memory awakening. Everyone knew that car. It was like a legend in our town. The kids adored him and that car. We were such a close-knit community back then. Henry was so gentle with the children, so patient, Eva murmured. The boys loved him. She turned the photo over, fingers searching for a date or scribbled note. Nothing. Then she turned it back and studied the background again. Her face darkened. Bill, are you absolutely sure this was taken the day they vanished? He looked at her, puzzled. Yes, I remember clearly. You took it just before we left for the park. Eva's eyes filled with suspicion. But Henry Foster had already moved away by then. Remember, the school held a going-away party for him. It was a big deal. The whole town was there. It was the day before this photo was supposedly taken. Bill's breath caught in his throat. The timeline didn't add up, and for the first time in years, doubt crept in like a shadow on a sunny day. I'm sure that photo was taken the morning they vanished. They didn't go missing until later that afternoon, he insisted. Eva leaned forward, her eyes scanning the image again. But that's just it, she said, her voice tight with urgency. Mr. Foster had already left town by then. He told everyone he was leaving town a week before, so why is his Cadillac in this photo? Bill set the album aside and turned back to the old box, rummaging through the layers of childhood keepsakes. Papers shuffled, cardboard bent. Then he paused, his hand pulling out a familiar yellowed Kodak envelope, brittle at the edges. This, he said, holding it up, this is the original film envelope. Look. He flipped it over to show the faded ink stamp. The film was developed 2 days after the boys disappeared. That confirms it. This photo was taken the morning they vanished. Eva hugged her arms to her chest, shivering despite the warm air in the living room. A chill crept down her spine. If that really was Mr. Foster's car, then he might have seen something that day, she whispered. Something suspicious, something important. She paused, her thoughts unraveling. But if the police ever questioned him, they never told us. They never mentioned him, which means he must have been long gone, right? Bill noticed the panic rising in her voice. He placed a calm hand on her shoulder. Eva, maybe it's not his car. Could have been a coincidence. A similar model, a neighbor's visitor, maybe even someone passing through. Eva shook her head. No one else on our block owned a Cadillac. Not that color, not that model. We were a tight-knit community. We knew everything about each other. Maybe someone had guests that day, Bill said gently. The police looked at every single photo we gave them. They questioned everyone. If that really was Mr. Foster's Cadillac, they would have caught it. They would have tracked the plates. They would have told us. Eva inhaled deeply as he handed her the tea again. The warmth seeped into her fingers, slowing her racing thoughts. You're probably right, she said quietly. It's probably nothing. Bill exhaled with relief and closed the album. Still, Eva carefully slid the photograph out and held it in her lap. She didn't want to let it go. Together, they began returning the contents to the box. Each small item, a tender relic of what once was, a love preserved in toys and trinkets and quiet memories. Bill glanced at the ornate clock on the mantel and suddenly stood upright. Good grief, I completely lost track of time. My checkup's at 11:50 and it's already 11:30. Eva looked up, startled. It's Saturday. The clinic closes at 1. You'd better go. They scrambled gently but quickly. She handed him his insurance card, his list of medications, and the small notebook where he'd logged his blood pressure readings. In less than 5 minutes, he was ready to go. At the door, he turned back, concerned. Are you sure you'll be all right by yourself? I'll be fine, Eva smiled, brushing his sleeve. I'll make lunch, maybe nap a bit this afternoon. Dinner will be waiting when you get back. Don't worry about me. Bill kissed her cheek and with one last look hurried to the car. As the sound of the engine faded, Eva walked into their bedroom and picked up her phone. A new message lit up the screen from Lynn Mitchell, an old friend who'd worked on the school board for nearly 30 years. Annual school district retiree reunion coming up next month. Hope to see you and Bill there. We miss you both. Eva sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the message. Lynn, of course. She would have worked closely with Mr. Foster. If anyone had answers, it was her. Eva didn't want to jump to conclusions. She didn't want to suspect Henry of anything. He'd been such a gentle man, beloved by students and parents alike. But that image, that car, had stirred something she couldn't ignore. Without overthinking it, she tapped Lynn's contact and pressed call. Eva, what a lovely surprise. Lynn's cheerful voice filled the line. Did you get my text about the reunion? I did. Bill and I will try to make it, Eva replied warmly. It's been far too long, Lynn. How have you been? The women chatted for several minutes, catching up on life, exchanging updates about grandchildren, retirement hobbies, and old neighbors. But eventually, Eva gently shifted the conversation. Lynn, do you remember Henry Foster? He taught at Oak Ridge Elementary back in the early 80s. Henry? Lynn laughed. Of course I do. Talented, kind. Everybody loved him. Do you know where he ended up after he left? Eva asked, trying to keep her tone casual. There was a pause. Well, actually, Eva, I think you might be remembering it wrong, Lynn said slowly. Henry didn't go on teaching. Not in public schools, anyway. As far as I know, he never filed any transfer paperwork after he left Oak Ridge. Eva froze. The air in the room seemed to thicken. What do you mean? She asked quietly. He never applied to another school in our district or any nearby, Lynn replied. In fact, after he left, no one really heard much from him at all. Transfer papers? Eva sat up straight on her, gripping the phone a little tighter. He never filed any. No, Lynn replied gently. I know we all thought he was moving to teach somewhere else, but that's not what really happened. Maybe he was just saying that as a kind farewell. You know how warm-hearted he was. Eva blinked, stunned. But we threw him a goodbye party. He said he was relocating to another district. Lynn's voice softened. I remember that. But from what I later heard, Henry moved to a remote area in Texas. He started some kind of private farm, a charity for immigrant children, I think. Farm? Eva repeated, confused. Yes, I believe it's a place where he helps boys and young men get back on their feet. He's doing good work. It's called... Wait, let me think. Lynn paused. Ah, yes, Foster's Haven for Hope. That was the name. Eva repeated it quietly. Foster's Haven for Hope. There was a long pause. Why are you suddenly asking about Henry? Lynn asked, her voice now curious. Eva hesitated. I was just looking through old photos, and I remembered his Cadillac. I saw one that looked exactly like it in a picture we took the day the boys disappeared. Oh yes, Lynn said with a nostalgic chuckle. He adored that car, that deep cherry Cadillac, but he hardly ever drove it. Said it was more of a collector's piece, preferred his old sedan for errands. Eva felt her heart begin to race again. Do you remember exactly when he left town? Lynn sighed. Eva, that was so long ago, I honestly couldn't say for certain. They exchanged goodbyes, and as soon as the call ended, Eva headed straight to the home office. She powered on the old desktop computer and typed Foster's Haven for Hope into the search bar. The website loaded slowly. It was plain with a modest banner image of a few smiling boys working on a farm, planting crops, tending animals, helping each other carry tools. Most of the children appeared to be of Mexican or Central American descent, all with bright, hopeful faces. Ava scrolled through the gallery, carefully inspecting each photo. Nothing looked suspicious. In fact, everything seemed wholesome. The mission statement talked about nurturing, education, structure, and support for immigrant youth. On the About page, Henry's face appeared, a little older now with graying hair and deeper lines in his smile. His brief biography noted his former career as an elementary school teacher, his passion for working with disadvantaged youth, and his vision for creating a safe space for growth and learning. Eva leaned closer to the screen. The website listed an address tucked in a rural part of southern Texas. There was no phone number, just a generic contact email. She stared at the screen, debating. It had been 30 years. Was she overthinking this? Or was her gut telling her something real? Maybe, just maybe, it was time to speak with Henry directly. Show him the photo, ask if that Cadillac really was his. A glance at the clock told her it was 11:45. If she left now, she could reach the farm by early afternoon. The drive would take only about 90 minutes, and the weather was clear. She picked up her phone and called Bill at the clinic. "Bill, how's the appointment going?" "I'm still in the waiting room," he answered. "Everything okay?" "Yes," she said quickly, "but I found something. I talked to Lynn. She told me Henry started a charity farm. It's called Foster's Haven for Hope. It's not far from here. I'd really like to go today." There was a pause. "Eva," Bill's voice was gentle but concerned. "I don't know, you're getting wrapped up in this Cadillac coincidence. I'm worried about you." "I'm fine," she assured him. "I just want peace of mind." Henry was always good to the boys. If that really was his car, I'd like to ask him directly. Maybe even reconnect. It could be nothing, but I'll never stop wondering if I don't check. Bill sighed on the other end. "Okay, but we should call him first, let him know we're coming." "I didn't find a phone number, just an email. I'll send a message, but there's no guarantee he'll see it in time." They agreed to meet at the clinic since it was on the way to the farm. Bill would finish his appointment, and Eva would take the bus to meet him there. "I'm leaving now," she said, already reaching for her purse. "See you soon." Eva stepped out of the house with a renewed sense of purpose, locking the door behind her and walking briskly down the sunlit sidewalk. The Texas heat was already building, pressing down on the streets with a thick humidity. She was grateful when the bus arrived just as she reached the corner stop, the doors hissing open with a breath of cool, recycled air. The 15-minute ride to the medical clinic passed in a blur, her thoughts spinning faster than the wheels beneath her. Henry Foster, the Cadillac, the boys. What if the answers had been just out of reach for all these years? As the bus slowed near the clinic, a young woman in a wide straw hat and a bright yellow t-shirt stood near the exit, handing out colorful flyers. "County Agricultural Fair this week," she chirped, flashing a smile before moving on to the next passenger. Eva barely registered the flyer as it was thrust into her hand, but glanced down at it while walking toward the clinic. Bold letters advertised a week-long agricultural celebration. Livestock shows, tractor demos, crafts, and food stalls. But what caught her eye was today's featured event, a special equipment auction happening at a nearby ranch. It wasn't far from Henry's farm. That tug of intuition deepened. "Interesting," she murmured, folding the flyer and slipping it into her purse. Inside the clinic, she spotted Bill at the front desk, signing a receipt and collecting his insurance card. He smiled when he saw her. "Perfect timing, huh?" he said, tucking the paperwork away. "Dr. Matthews says I'm doing great. My blood pressure's come down since they adjusted my meds." "That's wonderful news," Eva replied, the warmth in her voice genuine. "Are you ready for our little adventure?" Minutes later, they were on the road, Bill behind the wheel of his sedan, following the GPS direction southward. The suburban landscape began to thin out, giving way to sprawling pastures, wooden fences, and sun-bleached silos. Crops stretched for miles, swaying gently under the cloudless saw. "Any reply to the email yet?" Bill asked, eyes scanning the road. Eva shook her head. Nothing. She reached into her purse and pulled out the flyer from earlier. But look at this. Got it at the bus stop. There's a big agricultural fair happening all week. Today's auction is being held just a few miles from Henry's farm. Bill gave it a quick glance. You think he might be there? It's possible, she said, unfolding the flyer across her lap. The auction site's in the same general area, just a different address. Let's stick to our plan and visit the farm first. We can always swing by the fair afterward. Bill nodded. Sounds good to me. The road narrowed and the GPS directed them onto a gravel drive flanked by tall wild grasses. A simple wooden sign stood at the turnoff carved with 3 words, Foster's Haven for Hope. They exchanged a quiet glance. The driveway stretched ahead, leading to a tidy cluster of buildings, an old farmhouse with a wide porch, a pair of weathered barns, and what looked like dormitories or residential cabins. The place was serene, almost too quiet, with only the faint rustle of trees and the distant hum of insects filling the air. As they stepped out of the car, a young man emerged from one of the barns. He looked to be in his early 20s, Hispanic with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands, dressed in worn jeans and a gray t-shirt. Bill raised a hand in greeting. Hello there? The young man returned the wave, his smile open and friendly. Hey, can I help you folks with something? We're looking for Henry Foster, Eva said, as she approached the young man. Is this his farm? The young man nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans. Yes, ma'am, this is Mr. Foster's place. Bill stepped forward. We didn't schedule an appointment. We're old friends. Henry was our son's teacher many years ago. We sent an email to the address on the website. Oh, the young man said, his face brightening in understanding. That's probably why no one replied. We switched email systems last month, but the website hasn't been updated yet. I'm really sorry. Is he here? Eva asked, trying not to let the disappointment creep into her voice. The young man shook his head. No, I'm afraid not. Most of the staff and kids went to the county agricultural event. There's an auction today, and we're also running a booth to promote our program. Ava sighed, glancing back at the car. We heard about it just before we arrived. She was already turning to leave when Bill gently touched her arm. Wait, he said, turning to the young man. Since we're already here, would it be all right if we looked around a little? We'd love to see what Henry's built here. It's impressive. The young man hesitated for a second, then nodded. Let me check with the supervisor on duty, just a moment. He stepped aside and pulled out his phone, speaking in low tones. When he returned, he was smiling again. It's fine. I'll give you a quick tour. For the next half hour, Eva and Bill followed him through the expansive property. He showed them the barns that house livestock, the horse stables, and the rows of green crops stretching toward the tree line. As they walked, he explained the farm's mission to give immigrant children a safe space to live, learn, and build confidence through agriculture and education. This one here, he said as they approached a colorful barn, is especially for the younger kids. Mr. Foster designed it as a creative space where they can play, explore, and just be kids. The barn's exterior was covered in joyful chaos, children's paintings, bright scribbles, shapes made of handprints. Inside, long tables were arranged with craft materials, dried beans, fabric scraps, glue, glitter, even cracked eggshells. Near the back, a man was arranging supplies on one of the tables. He looked up as they entered. A man in his late 30s or early 40s with thick black curls and fair skin. His smile was wide, almost too wide, lighting up his face in a way that was strangely familiar. Finn, the young guide called. These are friends of Mr. Foster. They stopped by hoping to see him. The man set down the supplies and approached, wiping his hands on a towel before extending one. I'm Finn, the activities coordinator. Nice to meet you. Eva and Bill Marlowe, Bill said, shaking his hand. We go way back with Henry. Finn gestured toward the tables he'd been working on. I'm setting up demos for some potential sponsors and community partners visiting this week. It's important they see how the children engage with the space. He moved around the room effortlessly, his hands quick and practiced, his voice full of enthusiasm. I've been here a long time, since I was 6, actually. Mr. Foster took me in when I had nowhere else to go. Henry was a school teacher before all this, Eva said softly, her eyes fixed on him. Our sons were in his class. He always had such a way with children. Finn smiled warmly. He still does. The kids look up to him like a father. They continued walking, taking in the vibrant artwork that filled an entire wall. Crayon rainbows, glued-on macaroni animals, nature collages made from bark and leaves. It was creative, chaotic, and beautiful. Then Eva saw it. A drawing stood out from the others, bright and meticulously detailed. A red Cadillac decorated with colored grains of rice was centered perfectly on a piece of thick paper. The artwork had more precision, more care than the others. That Cadillac, she whispered, pointing. That was Mr. Foster's car, his pride and joy. Finn followed her gaze. Yes, he still has it. Actually, he took it out this morning for the event. He stepped closer to the drawing, smiling with a glimmer of pride. That one's mine. I made it as a demonstration for the kids. Wanted to show them how to use natural textures in their art. That's why it looks so tight, he chuckled, motioning to the more chaotic, glitter-covered pieces around it. But Eva didn't laugh. A chill swept through her, a strange shiver that climbed her spine and lingered in her arms. She stared at Finn, his thick black curly hair, his overly bright smile. The expressive way he moved his hands when he talked was all familiar. Too familiar. Finn caught her gaze and tilted his head slightly. Is everything all right, ma'am? Bill, sensing her unease, gently placed a hand on the small of her back. A quiet signal. Eva blinked. Yes, sorry, it's just these crafts. They reminded me of my boys when they were little. She forced a smile, but inside something had shifted. A memory was stirring, one she hadn't expected, one she couldn't ignore. She hesitated, then glanced at Finn. Do you have any siblings? She asked casually, though her voice carried an undertone of something deeper. Ava, Bill said softly, a cautioning note in his voice. Finn gave a short, slightly awkward chuckle. Yeah, actually, I do. My brother's at the fair today with Mr. Foster. They're helping run the booth. He checked his watch and smiled. You should swing by if you have time. There's a children's performance coming. Up and the big auction. It's always fun. They thanked him for his time, and their young guide escorted them back through the sun-drenched property toward the parking area. As they walked, Eva looked over her shoulder once more. Her thoughts churned with questions she couldn't yet put into words, threads of memory tugging at her mind. Back at the car, they thanked the guide again and got in. Eva's fingers trembled slightly as she fumbled with her seatbelt. The image of Finn, his curly black hair, that radiant smile, and the way he moved his hands lingered in her thoughts like a ghost. Bill started the engine and checked his phone. The auction site is about 20 minutes away. Do we go? Absolutely, Eva said firmly, her voice tight with anticipation. I need to speak with Henry. They pulled out onto the dusty country road, fields stretching endlessly on both sides. As they drove, Bill glanced at her, brows creased with concern. Ava, why did you ask Finn if he had siblings? She stared out the window, watching tractors dot the horizon and sunlight shimmer off rows of crops. I don't know, she said softly. When I saw that Cadillac drawing and then him, the hair, the smile, it hit me. He reminded me of Liam. Bill shook his head, trying to stay grounded. Ava, come on. You know better than that. They look completely different. Hair texture, a smile, that's not enough. I know, she said quickly. I'm not saying it is him. I'm not. It's just something about him felt familiar. Bill gently patted her hand, offering comfort without saying more. The rest of the short drive passed in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. They arrived at the county fairgrounds, a lively sprawl of color and noise. Rows of white tents, hay bales, and food stalls surrounded an open field filled with tractors, antique plows, and prize-winning livestock. Children ran between booths, ribbons fluttered in the breeze, and the smell of roasted corn drifted through the air. No auction going on now, Bill said, scanning the posted event schedule near the entrance. Looks like it wrapped up earlier. They strolled through the fair, stopping occasionally at exhibits. Eva's eyes searched every face, every corner, her heart pounding louder than the cheerful music playing through the loudspeakers. Then she saw it, a white tent with a blue banner stretched across the top, Foster's Haven for Hope. Her breath caught. Standing just outside the tent, deep in conversation with a middle-aged couple, was a man with a thick head of white hair. His gestures were animated, his posture familiar. Even from a distance, she knew it was him. Henry Foster. She froze. Though 3 decades had passed, she recognized him instantly. His hair had turned silver, his face now marked by deep lines, but his eyes, his mannerisms, they were exactly the same. They waited patiently until the couple said their goodbyes and walked away. Then Eva and Bill stepped forward. "Mr. Foster," Bill said gently. The man turned toward them, polite but unsure. "Yes, can I help you?" "You probably don't remember us," Eva began. "I'm Eva Marlowe, and this is my husband, Bill. Our sons, Liam, Nathan, and Gage, were your students at Oak Ridge Elementary." Henry's brow creased as he studied them, his eyes narrowing with the effort of recalling a memory long buried. "I'm terribly sorry," he said. "It's been so long. I'm nearly 70 now. Can you believe that?" He tapped the side of his head, smiling faintly. "The memory slips more and more every year." Ava stepped a little closer. "I helped organize your farewell party at the school. You were leaving, and the moms wanted to do something special. If there was ever a woman with 3 identical little boys following her like ducklings, it was Pipey." Recognition slowly dawned. Henry's face softened, then lit up with a warm, genuine smile. "Of course, the Marlows." He shook his head gently. "Liam, Nathan, and Gage, bright boys, all 3. How could I forget?" Then the smile faltered slightly. "I was heartbroken when I heard what happened. A terrible tragedy. I didn't know how to reach out. I wasn't sure if I should." "We always thought you moved out of state to teach," Eva said carefully, her eyes studying his face. "That's what you told everyone." Henry shook his head. "No, I stayed in Texas. After leaving Oak Ridge, I moved to a smaller town to get a certification in agriculture and child development. I was laying the groundwork for this place," he said, gesturing toward the tent, the fair, and the fields beyond. "Starting this farm was always my dream," Henry said, his tone turning nostalgic. "Something I'd been planning for years. A place where children could heal and grow." Eva leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but pointed. "Mr. Foster, do you remember the exact date you left town? Was it before or after my boys disappeared?" "Before," Henry said quickly, almost too quickly. "It must have been before, otherwise the police would have contacted me. I was never questioned." He tilted his head slightly. "Why do you ask?" Ava didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her purse and carefully pulled out the photograph, the one she had taken from the photo album that morning. Her hand trembled slightly as she offered it to him. "I was looking at this earlier," she said, unfolding the image. "It was taken the morning the boys disappeared. Just an hour before they were gone." She pointed to the blurred edge of the frame. "That's your Cadillac, isn't it? Parked across the street." Bill stepped beside her, his voice calm but direct. "Do you remember driving through our neighborhood that day, Mr. Foster? Were you near our house?" Henry's expression shifted. The warmth vanished from his features, replaced by something cooler, measured. His jaw tightened as he studied the photo in silence. The moment stretched. "I can't remember the exact day I left town," he said at last, voice quieter, flatter. "And I certainly don't recall driving through your neighborhood or seeing your boys. Not that day." He handed the photo back with steady hands. "That Cadillac must belong to someone else." Bill gave a small nod, laying a hand on Eva's shoulder. "Well, at least now we have our answer." Eva nodded too, but she noticed the subtle change in Bill's posture, the way his jaw clenched, the way he suddenly avoided her eyes. He was trying to stay composed, but something had unsettled him. Henry looked at them again, face unreadable. "Do you think the Cadillac is connected to your boy's disappearance?" "We're not sure," Bill replied. "The police never brought it up back in '81. We just noticed it in the photo today." Henry glanced at his watch. "It's nearly 3:30. We'll need to start wrapping up." He turned to 2 men standing behind the display table. "Let's begin packing. The event ends at 4 o'clock. Then he faced Eva and Bill again, his voice polite. "You should take a look around while there's still time. In about 5 minutes, the kids from our farm will do the closing performance. It's just over there." He pointed toward a small wooden stage at the edge of the fairgrounds. "It's quite sweet. You might enjoy it." "Thank you," Bill said, nodding. "It was good seeing you again, Henry." As they walked away from the tent, Ava trailed behind slightly. She turned her head, stealing one last glance, and then she heard it. Henry's voice, low, sharp, and urgent. He was turned away from the crowd, speaking into his phone. Leave immediately after the performance. Get Dean here. A pause. Yes, now. Eva stopped mid-step. She turned slowly. Henry was busy directing his staff again, smiling, gesturing as if nothing had happened, but the urgency in his voice still echoed in her ears like a warning bell. She quickened her pace and caught up to Bill. Her heart was pounding now, her mind racing with questions she didn't yet dare ask out loud. They reached the small outdoor stage where children, about 24 of them, were lining up in neat rows. Most were between 6 and 9 years old, with a few even younger. Their clothes were bright and homespun, their eyes shining with anticipation. Music started, a cheerful folk tune in Spanish, and the children began to sing. Their voices were sweet, innocent, but Eva couldn't concentrate on the melody. Her eyes scanned the crowd, the staff, the shadows behind the tents. She watched every movement, searching for something, anything that felt out of place. And then she saw him, a man moving quickly near the vendor stalls just past the edge of the stage. He walked with purpose, almost urgency, weaving through the fairground like someone with a destination and a deadline. His hair caught the sunlight, dark, thick, unmistakably curly. Bill, she whispered, grabbing his arm. Look, over there by the vendor tents. Eva tugged at Bill's sleeve, eyes locked on the figure, striding quickly through the fairground. Look at that man, she said quietly, pointing discreetly. The one moving fast. Do you see his hair? Doesn't he look like Finn? Bill followed her gaze, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the man weaving through the crowd. The resemblance was uncanny. Yes, he said slowly. That's striking. Do you think they're twins? Eva asked, barely containing the tremble in her voice. But before Bill could answer, she was already moving, slipping between spectators, determined to get a clearer view. Bill followed closely behind, catching up as they ducked around a cotton candy stand and positioned themselves where they could observe without drawing attention. The man had reached the Foster's Haven booth and was speaking with Henry himself. Their exchange looked tense. Fast words, sharp gestures. Then, as the man turned slightly to the side, Eva gasped. It was him. Or rather, it was almost him. The same thick dark curls, the same defined brow, the same bright animated smile that mirrored Finn's perfectly. If she didn't know better, she'd swear it was the same person, except this one was clearly someone else. This has to be the brother Finn mentioned, she whispered. Dean. Bill's face had gone pale, his eyes fixed on the two men now deep in conversation. The same smile, the same eyes, he said almost to himself. Eva's voice cracked as she gripped his arm. Bill, could they be Liam and Nathan? He said nothing. Eva's mind raced. Remember? Gage was always the smallest. His eyes were softer, easier to recognize. Nathan had those thicker brows, and he was the fast one, always climbing trees. Liam was the boldest, always leading them. Before Bill could respond, Henry suddenly turned, gesturing sharply to Dean. The two broke off their conversation and began walking briskly toward the parking area, leaving the other staff behind, visibly confused. Why are they leaving so fast? Eva's voice rose with concern. We should follow them. I need to speak to that man. He has to be Dean. She moved forward, but Bill caught her arm. Eva, wait. His voice was calm but firm. If they are our sons, then where's Gage? Eva froze. We should check the fairgrounds, Bill continued. If Gage is here too, then we call the police. We don't confront them yet. Not without proof. Eva nodded reluctantly. You're right, and we know where the farm is. We can go back if we have to. They turned and moved quickly through the fair, scanning the crowd, peering behind booths and tents, searching for a third familiar face. But they found nothing. No third man, no sign of Gage. Maybe we're wrong, Hippon, Bill said, but even he didn't sound convinced. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Eva said nothing. She was already walking back toward Henry's tent. Only one staff member remained, an older man in his 60s with sun-weathered skin and heavy hands that looked like they'd worked fields his whole life. Excuse me, Eva said, trying to keep her tone light. We visited the farm earlier today and met Finn. Then we saw another man here who looked just like him. Dean? The man nodded with a smile. They're twins. Twins? Eva repeated, glancing at Bill. The man chuckled. Well, here's a fun fact. They're not just twins, they're triplets. Eva's breath caught. The third one isn't here today, the man continued. He works at Mr. Foster's private estate, not far from the farm. Ava and Bill turned to each other at the same time, their faces reflecting the same mix of disbelief, hope, and a rising tide of dread. Where is this private estate? They asked together, voices overlapping in unison. The man blinked, clearly startled by the intensity of their synchronized question. I'm sorry, he said carefully. I can't share the owner's private address. That's confidential. He reached into a nearby box and handed Bill a brochure. Here's the farm's public contact info if you want to learn more about our programs. Thank you, Bill said, his voice tight as he accepted the brochure, even though they already had one. They stepped away from the booth and moved to a quiet corner near a row of potted plants. The noise of the fair seemed to fade around them. Bill? Eva whispered, her voice barely holding together. Triplets. They're triplets, and they're the right age. Bill didn't speak, but in his eyes she saw the same truth that had just split her world open. Finn said he's been with Henry since he was 6, Eva murmured, her voice shaking. Our boys were 6 when they disappeared. Bill ran a hand through his hair, his face pale. It can't be coincidence, the Cadillac in the photo, Henry's reaction. And now these 3 young men, triplets the same age, who look so much like our boys. Eva finished, tears spilling into her voice. After all these years, could we have finally found them? Without another word, they rushed back toward the parking lot, scanning desperately for Henry or Dean. But both men had vanished. Bill jumped behind the wheel and started the engine. We're going back to the farm, he said, his voice low and determined, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. That's where they'll go. It's where they always return. As they pulled out onto the main road, Eva was already dialing 911. The dispatcher answered, and Eva's voice trembled as she spoke. I need to speak to a detective. It's about our cold case. Missing children from 1981. Within moments, she was transferred. This is Detective Martin, Missing Persons Unit. This is going to sound unbelievable, Eva began, gripping the phone tightly. But my husband and I believe we found our sons, our triplets, who disappeared over 30 years ago. She recounted everything. The photograph with the Cadillac, their encounter with Henry Foster at the charity farm, the discovery of Finn and Dean, 2 men who appeared identical and were confirmed to be triplets, with a third brother working off-site. They'd be 36 now, she added, her voice steadying, and they look exactly how we'd imagine our boys would. The man who took them, Henry Foster, was their teacher. And when we showed him the photo, he left the event suddenly with one of the young men. I understand your concerns, Mrs. Marlowe, the detective replied. His voice was calm but authoritative. Detective Martin was an African-American officer with over 20 years of experience in missing persons cases. His reputation for solving cold cases had earned him respect throughout the department. But I need your word, he continued. Do not confront Mr. Foster on your own. He was a respected figure in that community, and we need to proceed with caution. My team is en route to the farm now. The local sheriff's department is being dispatched as well. They should be there in under 10 minutes. We're almost there, Bill said, turning down the gravel road that led back to Foster's Haven for Hope. If you see him, the detective continued, maintain your distance. The fact that he left early with one of the men is significant, but we need to act carefully. We will, Eva promised, her voice barely a whisper. They kept the line open as Bill parked the car behind a cluster of trees near the edge of the property, far enough to stay hidden, close enough to observe. Minutes passed. Nothing moved. Then finally 3 figures emerged from the main farmhouse. Henry, Finn, and Dean. They moved fast, tossing duffel bags into the trunk of a car, Henry's Cadillac. They're leaving, Eva whispered into the phone. All 3 of them. They're getting into Henry's car. Stay where you are, Detective Martin ordered. We just confirmed the property is registered under an alias. We're issuing warrants now for both the farm and the private estate. Just then, 2 sheriff's cruisers turned onto the gravel road, lights flashing. They pulled in swiftly, blocking the exit. They're here, Eva said breathlessly. The deputies just arrived. Stay in your vehicle, the detective said. Do not engage. Let them do their job. From behind their windshield, Eva and Bill watched as 4 deputies approached the Cadillac. hands hovering near their holsters. Tension hung heavy in the air. Henry stepped out, his hands raised, but his expression a mix of confusion and controlled fury. Finn and Dean followed, slower, glancing at each other with unsure eyes. One of the deputies began questioning Henry, who responded with animated gestures, pointing back toward the house, shaking his head with increasing urgency. Bill leaned in, watching closely. I think the sheriff's hesitant. Henry's well known around here. Respected. Maybe too respected. They could hear bits of the conversation on the wind. Been in this community for years. Helps local kids. Must be a misunderstanding. Eva's grip on her purse tightened. Her voice broke. I can't wait anymore. She dropped the phone into her bag but kept the line open. Then she stepped out of the car. I'm not letting him walk away, Eva said through gritted teeth. Before Bill could stop her, she threw the door open and strode toward the group, purpose in every step, fear trailing behind her like a shadow. Eva, wait, Bill called, rushing to catch up, but she didn't stop. Henry Foster, she shouted, her voice echoing across the quiet farmyard. Stronger than she felt. All heads turned. Henry froze mid-sentence, his expression hardening when he saw her, his hands, still loosely raised from the deputy's approach, curled into fists at his sides. Mrs. Marlowe, one of the deputies said quickly, stepping toward her, please return to your vehicle. This is an active investigation. But Ava didn't move. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out the old photograph. Creased, sacred. She held it up, facing them all, her hand trembling, but steady enough to make the truth visible. If you're even considering letting this man go, she said, voice fierce and raw, then let me show you something. She held the photo higher. These are my sons, Liam, Nathan, and Gage Marlowe. They disappeared on June 12, 1981. We took this photo the morning they vanished, just 1 hour before. Then she turned slowly and pointed directly at Finn and Dean. And here are two of them standing right in front of you. Finn and Dean stared, eyes fixed on the image. Confusion flickered across their faces, then disbelief, then recognition. Finn took a slow step forward, his voice dropped to a whisper. That's us with Mark. Mark? Dean added softly, his face pale. The deputy looked between them. There's a third brother? Both men nodded, still transfixed by the photograph. I didn't do anything wrong, Henry suddenly burst out, his voice raised. I saved these boys. They were abandoned, left behind like trash. Eva's voice cracked as she stepped forward, tears spilling freely now. They were not abandoned. They were taken from our front yard. They vanished while playing outside, and we never saw them again. She turned the photo over and pointed to the blurry corner of the frame. That's your Cadillac, isn't it, Henry? The same one you still drive? Henry didn't answer, but his jaw clenched tight. It's in the garage, Dean said quietly without looking at Henry. Still the same car, same color, same shape. Finn's eyes darted between Eva and Bill. Are you really our parents? He asked, barely breathing. Henry told us a different story our whole lives, Dean whispered, that our real parents were criminals. Dangerous. Gone. We were never in prison, Eva continued. That man has been lying to you all your lives, but you've grown into strong, kind men, exactly who we always believed you'd become. Dean blinked hard, stunned. We're 36 now. That's right, Eva nodded. You were born on February 15th, 1970. The deputies exchanged looks. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Then the lead officer stepped forward. Mr. Foster, turn around, place your hands behind your back. Henry's eyes burned with defiance, but he didn't resist. As one deputy cuffed him, another spoke urgently into a radio, confirming the warrant to search both the farm and the private residence. Suddenly, the peaceful farm became a scene of law enforcement activity. Sheriff's cruisers pulling in, officers moving quickly with purpose. Forensic teams entered the house. Detectives split off, pulling Finn and Dean aside for separate interviews. In the garage, they found it. The Cadillac, cherry red paint faded with time, but unmistakable. The same car from the photograph. Inside Henry's office, in a locked drawer, investigators uncovered the original license plate, removed and hidden. Alongside it were forged documents, new identities for all three boys, names they'd been living under for decades. Liam, Nathan, engage, Eva told the detective, watching numbly as the documents were sealed in evidence bags. I know who's who. Finn is Liam. He has the same wide smile. Dean is Nathan. He was always fast, agile. And Mark must be Gage. They're not even Mexican, Bill added, turning to the detectives. Though we do have some mixed heritage, it's how they were able to pass without raising questions. When asked about the third brother, Finn's voice broke slightly. Henry never let Mark come to the farm. He stays at the private house, takes care of the youngest kids, mostly orphans, immigrant children. Eva closed her eyes. Gage, their baby, still out there, still under Henry's control, but not for long. He told us we were rescued, Dean said quietly, staring at the floor. Said our parents were immigrants who had done something terrible and were in prison for life. We were so young when it happened. We believed him. A detective leaned forward gently. What did he do to you? The room fell into a heavy silence. Finn and Dean glanced at each other, the pain of unspoken years etched deep in their expressions. Nothing bad in the last 20 years, Finn said slowly. But when we were kids, it was different. He demanded total obedience. Every detail had to be done exactly his way. Dean's voice was even quieter. Our childhood was harsh. He'd discipline us, make us strip. Sometimes he'd touch us in ways that felt wrong, then hit us with a rattan stick. Said it was the consequence of being naughty. His eyes watered, but he didn't look away. He made us believe we were bad, that we deserved it, especially me. I used to think it was my fault. The room stayed still. Nobody spoke for several long seconds. Then, as twilight fell over the farm, a call came through from the search team stationed at Henry's private residence. We found Mark, the officer on the line reported. He's here along with 8 other children between 4 and 10 years old. We're transporting all of them to the hospital for evaluation. Most appear scared. Some are clearly traumatized. Ava's heart leapt. Mark, how is he? He's confused but physically okay, the officer reassured her. We explained the situation. He's being brought to the station now. You'll be reunited there, him, Finn, Dean, and both of you. Night settled slowly across the landscape as Eva and Bill were escorted into the back of a patrol car. Behind them, the lights of the farm faded into the darkness. A place that had once been their son's prison, and for a time their home, was now finally exposed. Ava held Bill's hand tightly, eyes locked on the road ahead. Our boys, she whispered. We found our boys. The fluorescent lights in the police station buzzed faintly, casting pale shadows across the scuffed linoleum floor. In a small interview room, Eva sat stiffly at a metal table, a styrofoam cup of coffee cooling in front of her. Detective Martin sat across from her, a recording device between them. His notepad lay open, pen poised. She spoke clearly, her hands knotted tightly in her lap. Our neighborhood back then, it was close. Everyone knew each other. Henry was respected. He was their favorite teacher. Parents trusted him. Sometimes he'd drive students home, with permission, of course. She paused. That day, June 12, 1981, Bill and I were both home, but it was a different time. We let the boys play outside by themselves. The neighbors all knew them. It felt safe. Detective Martin nodded. You didn't see them being taken. Ava shook her head, eyes brimming again. I was folding laundry in the back room. Bill was fixing something in the backyard. Neither of us was near the front window. Her voice cracked. One moment they were right there in the front yard, and the next they were just gone. Detective Martin made a few quiet notes. Then he looked up. Mrs. Marlowe, we've spoken to Henry Foster. He's decided not to fight the charges. He's cooperating, confessing even. Eva sat up straighter. What did he say? He said he always felt a strange connection to the boys. He told us that on the afternoon before he was supposed to leave town, he made the decision to take them. Martin flipped through his notes. He lured them with ice cream, promised a short drive in his Cadillac. Apparently the boys, especially Liam, were fascinated by the car. Ava closed her eyes. Liam loved that car. Had the kidnapping planned, the detective continued. He'd packed bags in advance, forged documents, used those to cross county lines undetected. Later, he returned and quietly purchased the farm property under a false LLC, claimed it was a nonprofit for migrant youth. Bill had joined them now, seated beside Eva, his face tight with disbelief. "But how did no one see anything?" he asked. "No witnesses, no screams." Martin shook his head slowly. To the outside world, he was a trusted figure, a teacher. Offering three curious little boys a ride in a fancy car, no one questioned it. And once he had them, he told them something terrifying. He hesitated. He told them their home was unsafe, that their parents were in danger or already gone. And then little by little, he rewrote their world. Over time, they believed him. Eva stared at the tabletop, her voice soft and haunted. They trusted him, and he turned them against us. They were only 6 years old, Detective Martin continued, his voice quiet, completely dependent, eager to please. At that age, it was relatively easy to manipulate them. Bill reached across the table, taking Eva's hand in his. His face was pale, lined with fury and grief. "He told them they were orphaned," the detective went on. "Said they were the children of undocumented immigrants, that you both had hidden the truth about their origins, and that you'd been imprisoned for life." Eva's lips parted in disbelief. "He created a whole new identity for them." Martin nodded grimly. "Fabricated documents, layer after layer of lies. He built an entire false history for them." Eva swallowed hard. "So the motive was what? Fascination?" The detective nodded. "We've looked into his past. In the early 1970s, Henry Foster lost his wife and twin sons in a house fire. The trauma went largely untreated. Outwardly, he seemed to function, but internally he fractured. According to his statements and early psychological assessments, he came to believe that certain children with deep emotional bonds, were meant to be his." Eva closed her eyes. The weight of it all settled like a stone in her chest. "Triplets," she whispered. "Triplets," Martin echoed. He saw them as a second chance. He convinced himself he was saving them. Bill's voice was low and tight. "What happens now?" "Mr. Foster will face multiple charges," the detective replied. "Kidnapping, child abuse, false imprisonment, identity fraud, the list goes on. As for the younger children found at his residence, they're being evaluated. We've already begun the process of identifying them and locating their families." He stood and crossed to the door. "But I think there are 3 people who've waited long enough to see you." He spoke quietly to someone in the hallway. A few heartbeats later, the door opened again. And there they were. Finn, Dean, Mark, Liam, Nathan, Gage. They stood in the doorway, uncertain, hesitant, but very much real. Grown men now, shaped by years lost and truths long buried. But even in their adult faces, Eva saw the traces of the boys she had once held close. Liam's unmistakable wide smile, Nathan's thoughtful, steady gaze, Gage's smaller frame, still the quiet one. For a moment, no one moved. 30 years of silence stretched between them. A lifetime of birthdays missed, scraped knees unwitnessed, graduations, first loves, heartbreaks, all lived without a mother's hug, without a father's hand on the shoulder. Then Eva stood. A sob escaped her chest, half joy, half anguish. She took one step forward, then another, her body trembling. Bill rose beside her, tears streaking down his cheeks, unashamed. "My boys," Eva whispered, her voice cracking. "My beautiful boys." It was Liam who moved first. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and pulled his mother into a desperate embrace. Nathan and Gage followed, wrapping their arms around her, around Bill, around each other. And for the first time in 3 decades, the 5 of them stood as a family again. No words, just the sound of breath and weeping, of lives reconnecting, of years unraveling. Eva placed her hands on their faces one by one, memorizing them all over again, lines and edges grown older, but still hers. "I never stopped looking for you," she said through her tears, "not for one single day." Gage looked at her, his voice soft as a sigh. "We didn't know. We thought you were gone." "But we're here now," Bill said, voice thick. "We're all here now." 2 days later, the initial shock had begun to settle, making room for the complicated reality of their situation. The Marlowe family sat in a private conference room at the sheriff's department, surrounded by case files, DNA results, and the weight of 30 years apart. Detective Martin entered with a stack of folders tucked under his arm. His face showed the fatigue of someone who hadn't slept much, but his eyes held a quiet satisfaction. The DNA tests confirm it, he said, placing the results on the table. 100% match. Finn, Dean, and Mark are indeed Liam, Nathan, and Gage Marlowe. Eva's hand trembled as she reached for the paper. Though she had known it in her heart from the moment she saw them, seeing the scientific confirmation brought fresh tears to her eyes. "We've been combing through Foster's records," Martin continued, opening another folder. "It's meticulous, disturbing work. He documented everything. How he groomed the boys to forget you, how he systematically replaced their memories with false ones, how he isolated them from the world." Bill's jaw clenched. And no one questioned him? For 30 years, no one thought it was strange that he suddenly had 3 boys. "He was careful," Martin replied. "He moved to a remote area, established himself as someone helping immigrant children. The nearest town had a large migrant community. People just assumed the boys were part of that population. And he kept them isolated for years, homeschooling them, limiting their contact with outsiders." Nathan, Dean, as he still instinctively thought of himself, spoke up. His voice was steady but hesitant, as if testing unfamiliar ground. "We didn't know we were kidnapped. He told us our parents were criminals who'd been arrested trying to smuggle us across the border. Said they'd abandoned us, that they were serving life sentences. We believed him." "How could we not?" Liam added softly. "We were 6. He was our teacher, someone we trusted. And he had documents, photos, newspaper clippings, all fabricated, we know now. But to children, it seemed real." Eva reached across the table, her fingers brushing Liam's. "It wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault." Gage, the quietest of the 3, had barely spoken since their reunion. He sat slightly apart, his eyes moving between his brothers and his parents, as if still trying to reconcile these strangers with the vague memories that had begun to surface. "I remember a dog," he said suddenly, his voice so soft they all leaned in to hear. "A golden retriever. She used to sleep at the foot of our bed." Eva's breath caught. "Bailey," she whispered. "You remember Bailey?" Gage nodded, a small, uncertain smile touching his lips. "She had a spot on her ear, dark brown, shaped like a heart." "That's right," Bill said, voice thick with emotion. "She lived to be 15. Used to howl every night for months after you disappeared. Wouldn't sleep anywhere but your room." The moment hung between them, fragile and precious, a first thread connecting past to present. Detective Martin cleared his throat gently. "We need to discuss what happens next. The case against Foster is strong. The evidence is overwhelming. But we'll need statements from all 3 of you," he said, looking at the brothers. "About the kidnapping or the abuse?" Nathan asked, his voice suddenly hard. "Both," Martin replied. "I know it's difficult, but your testimony will ensure he never does this to anyone else." Liam nodded slowly. "There are other children. The ones you found at the estate. They're not kidnapped, at least not that we know of, but they're not being treated well. Gage, can tell you more. He worked with them every day." All eyes turned to Gage. "Most are undocumented," he said quietly. "Brought to the farm by desperate parents who believed Henry's promises of education and care. Some were abandoned, some were runaways Henry found. He kept them isolated, dependent. The abuse wasn't as severe as what we experienced, but they were still prisoners in many ways." Eva's heart broke anew. "What will happen to them?" "We're working with child services," Martin explained, "trying to locate families where possible. For others, foster care until more permanent arrangements can be made." The conversation continued, delving into the legal processes that would follow, the psychological support they would all need, the long journey ahead. But beneath the practicalities lay the unspoken question. What now? How does a family rebuild after 30 years of separation? As the meeting concluded, Detective Martin pulled Eva and Bill aside. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice low. "We found a journal in Foster's office. It appears he was planning to move again, take the boys and disappear. Your timing was providential." Eva's blood ran cold at the thought of how close they'd come to losing their sons a second time. There's more, Martin added, hesitation in his voice. The journal mentions others. Other children over the years. Bill's face paled. Others? You mean he took other children before our boys? Martin nodded grimly. We've identified at least two other cases of missing children that match his pattern. One from 1975 in Oklahoma, another from 1978 in New Mexico. Both were pairs of twins. Both cases went cold. Did he? Eva couldn't finish the question. We don't know yet, Martin said quietly. We're expanding the search of his properties, looking for evidence. But the journal suggests they didn't adapt as well as your sons did. He writes about failed attempts. Eva gripped Bill's arm for support, the horror of what they were hearing almost too much to bear. The monster who had stolen their children had likely taken others, with results too terrible to contemplate. As they left the conference room, they found their sons waiting in the hallway. 30 years of separation had created a chasm between them, filled with unanswered questions and unshared memories. But as they stood together, five people connected by blood and loss and newfound hope, Eva made a silent promise. They would cross that chasm, no matter how long it took. Outside, reporters had gathered, hungry for details of the remarkable reunion. Eva squeezed Bill's hand as they approached the exit, bracing for the onslaught. Are you ready for this? He asked their sons. Liam, ever the leader, straightened his shoulders. We've faced worse. Nathan nodded in agreement. Together this time. Gage, still quiet but with growing resolve, added softly, as a family. And with that, the five Marlows stepped into the blinding flash of cameras, their extraordinary story about to captivate the world, a tale of unspeakable cruelty, remarkable resilience, and the enduring power of family bonds that 30 years of separation could not break. The nation was captivated by the story that unfolded over the following weeks. News outlets across the country ran headlines about the miracle in Texas and lost triplets found after 3 decades. The Marlowe family's remarkable reunion became a symbol of hope for countless families of missing children who had never stopped searching. But away from the cameras and public fascination, the real work of healing had only just begun. Eva sat in the waiting room of Dr. Rebecca Sanders, one of the nation's leading trauma specialists. The walls were painted a soothing sage green, adorned with abstract art meant to calm troubled minds. She checked her watch again. Bill would be bringing the boys soon for their first family therapy session. The boys. She still thought of them that way, even though they were grown men of 30. In her heart, they remained the 6-year-olds who had vanished from her front yard that summer day in 1981. The door opened, and Dr. Sanders emerged, extending her hand with a warm smile. Mrs. Marlowe, please come in. The others should be here shortly. Eva followed her into a spacious room with comfortable seating arranged in a circle. Large windows looked out onto a peaceful garden where a small fountain burbled among native plants. How are you holding up? Dr. Sanders asked, genuine concern in her eyes. Eva sighed, settling into a soft armchair. It's overwhelming. One moment I'm euphoric. The next, I'm devastated thinking about everything we missed. Their first days of school, graduations, learning to drive. Her voice caught. 30 years. Gone in an instant. Dr. Sanders nodded. That's completely normal. You're experiencing a complex grief reaction. Joy for having found them, but also mourning the time that was stolen from all of you. Before Eva could respond, the door opened again. Bill entered, followed by Liam, Nathan, and Gage, still more comfortable being called Finn, Dean, and Mark. The 3 brothers moved with visible tension, their bodies stiff, expressions guarded. After introductions and settling in, Dr. Sanders addressed the group. I want to acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances that bring you all together today. There's no roadmap for what you're experiencing, no guidebook for rebuilding a family after 30 years of separation and deception. But that's what we'll work on together, creating that roadmap, one step at a time. Gage, Mark, spoke first, his voice quiet but steady. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a son to people I don't remember. I keep waiting for memories to come back, but there are just fragments. Eva's heart ached, but she remained silent, giving him space to express himself. A yellow bedroom, he continued, a dog, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. But I don't remember you. He looked at Eva and Bill apologetically. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, Bill said gently. You were 6 years old when he took you, and he worked systematically to replace those memories. Dr. Sanders nodded. The brain is remarkably adaptable, especially in childhood. Henry Foster understood this. The police found detailed journals documenting his methods for erasing your past and creating a new narrative. Nathan, Dean, leaned forward, elbows on knees. He told us our parents were criminals, that they'd tried to use us for drug smuggling, that we were lucky to have been rescued. His voice hardened. Every night for months, he'd make us recite it before bed. Our real parents didn't want us, or Foster saved us. We're grateful to Mr. Foster. Eva stifled a sob, and Bill's hand found hers, squeezing tightly. And we believed him, Liam added quietly. Why wouldn't we? We were children. He was a trusted adult, and he had evidence, newspaper clippings, court documents, photos, all fabricated, we know now, but to us, it was real. Dr. Sanders made a few notes before responding. This is what makes Foster's crime particularly heinous. He didn't just physically abduct you. He conducted a form of psychological warfare against children. He systematically dismantled your identities and rebuilt them according to his design. The hardest part, Nathan said, is reconciling who we thought we were with who we actually are. I've been Dean Ramirez for 30 years. Now suddenly I'm Nathan Marlowe again. Who is that person? I don't know him. Eva couldn't stay silent any longer. I know him, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He was fearless, always the first to climb the highest tree, to jump into the deep end of the pool. He collected rocks, had hundreds of them, sorted by color and size in shoeboxes under his bed. He couldn't sleep without his stuffed tiger. Stripes. He hated peas but would eat them if we mixed them with mashed potatoes. Nathan stared at her, something flickering in his eyes. Recognition, confusion, a hunger for more. Bill picked up where Eva left off. Liam was our leader, always organizing the three of you into elaborate games. He could talk his way out of trouble better than any child I have ever known. Gage was our observer, quieter than his brothers, but always watching, always thinking. He drew the most incredible pictures for a 6-year-old. Gage's eyes widened. I still draw, he said softly. Henry, Mr. Foster. He said it was a waste of time, but I never stopped. I have sketchbooks hidden all over the estate. The session continued for 2 hours, painful memories and cautious hopes flowing like a river between them. When it ended, Dr. Sanders reminded them that healing would be a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient with yourselves, she advised. You're not just getting to know each other, you're rebuilding your own identities. As they left the office, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Detective Martin stepped out, his expression grave. I'm sorry to intrude, he said, but we found something at Foster's private estate. Something you need to see. The estate stood on 20 acres of secluded woodland, a sprawling main house flanked by several smaller cabins. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off the property, and law enforcement vehicles lined the long driveway. Detective Martin led the Marlowe family into what appeared to be a home office, a wood-paneled room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk. Evidence markers dotted the space, each numbering a potential piece of the puzzle. We've been searching the premises for 5 days now, Martin explained. This morning, one of our technicians discovered a hidden room behind this bookcase. He gestured to a shelf that now stood ajar, revealing a narrow passageway. What's in there? Bill asked, his voice tight with apprehension. It's better if you see for yourselves, Martin replied, handing each of them a pair of latex gloves. Just don't touch anything. This is still an active crime scene. One by one, they filed through the opening into a small, windowless room. The space was meticulously organized, walls lined with filing cabinets and shelves. But it was the center of the room that drew their attention, a table displaying 3 small school desks arranged in a row. On each desk lay a stack of neatly folded clothing, 3 pairs of green checkered overalls with bright yellow straps. Oh my God, Eva whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Martin gestured to the filing cabinets. He kept everything, detailed journals documenting the abduction, the psychological techniques he used, even recordings of your therapy sessions where he systematically replaced your memories. Liam approached one of the desks slowly as if in a trance. "These are the clothes we were wearing when he took us," he said, his voice hollow. "Yes," Martin confirmed. "He preserved them, like artifacts. But that's not all we found." He led them to a large corkboard on the far wall. Pinned to it were dozens of photographs, surveillance photos of the Marlowe family home from before the abduction, pictures of the boys playing into the front yard, images of Eva and Bill coming and going. "He stalked you for weeks," Martin explained, "planned every detail. The farewell party at the school was just a cover, a way to establish his alibi. He never intended to leave town until he had your sons." Bill's face had turned ashen. All this time, all those years of wondering, of blaming ourselves, he had it planned from the beginning. "Yes," Martin said gravely, "and there's more." He hesitated, looking specifically at the three brothers. "We found evidence of other children. Before you." Nathan's head snapped up. "What do you mean, before us?" Martin sighed heavily. "Foster's fixation on multiples, twins, triplets, it didn't start with you. We found documentation of 2 previous attempts, pairs of twins he abducted in other states, but they didn't adapt as well as you did." "Are you saying he killed them?" Gage asked, his voice barely audible. "We're still investigating," Martin replied carefully. "But yes, that's what we suspect. The remains of 4 children have been discovered on the property. Preliminary examinations suggest they died decades ago." Ava sank onto a nearby chair, the horror of it all washing over her in waves. Not only had this man stolen her children, but he had done the same to other families, with far more tragic results. "Why did he keep us alive?" Liam asked, the question hanging in the air like a dark cloud. "According to his journals," Martin said, "you were his perfect subjects. 3 identical boys with strong bonds to each other but compliant personalities. Where the others fought him, tried to escape, or became severely depressed, you adapted. You survived by conforming." Nathan's face contorted with a mixture of grief and rage. "So we're alive because we were good victims? Is that what you're saying?" "You're alive because you were children who did what you had to do to survive," Martin corrected firmly. "Never blame yourselves for that." They spent another hour in that terrible room, each coming to terms with the full scope of Henry Foster's depravity, the calculated nature of his crimes, the decades of deception, the lives destroyed in service to his twisted obsession. When they finally emerged back into the sunlight, they stood together in silence, bound by a shared trauma that no one else could fully comprehend. The truth had been unveiled, but the weight of it threatened to crush them all. 1 month after the dramatic reunion at the police station, the Marlowe family gathered in Eva and Bill's living room. The house was the same one where the boys had grown up for their first 6 years. Eva and Bill had never been able to bring themselves to move, always hoping their sons would somehow find their way back home. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Dented family members waited anxiously, grandparents now in their 80s, aunts, uncles, cousins who had grown up hearing stories of the missing triplets, but never expecting to meet them. "They're here," Ava announced, peering through the curtains as a car pulled into the driveway. Bill stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "Remember what Dr. Sanders said? No pressure, no expectations. This is overwhelming for everyone." Ava nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The doorbell rang, and she moved to answer it, heart pounding. There they stood, Liam, Nathan, and Gage, still slightly uncomfortable in their birth identities, but making a concerted effort. Each carried a small gift, a gesture that brought tears to Eva's eyes. "Welcome home," she said simply, stepping aside to let them enter. The reunion that followed was both joyous and awkward, filled with tears and tentative embraces. Elderly grandparents wept as they held grandsons they had last seen as kindergartners. Cousins introduced themselves, searching for commonalities. Family photos were brought out, stories shared, connections slowly rebuilt. Throughout the afternoon, Eva observed her sons navigating this new world of blood relations. Nathan, always the most physical of the 3, seemed to relax the most, laughing with cousins who shared his athletic build and quick wit. Liam, ever adaptable, moved smoothly between conversations, asking questions, absorbing information about his heritage. Gage remained the quietest, but Ava noticed him in deep conversation with his maternal grandfather, both men speaking softly about art and creative expression. As the gathering wound down, Bill called everyone to attention, raising a glass and toast. To family, he said simply, lost and found. Later, as the last guest departed, the five Marlowes sat together on the back porch, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The silence between them was comfortable now, no longer fraught with the tension of strangers. "I have something to show you," Eva said finally, rising from her chair. She disappeared into the house, returning moments later with a large, flat package wrapped in plain brown paper. "When you disappeared," she explained, her voice soft with memory, "I made a promise to myself. Each year on your birthday, I'd add to this, something to mark the milestone you should have been celebrating with us." She handed the package to Gage, the youngest of the triplets, by 7 minutes. With careful movements, he unwrapped it, revealing a large leather-bound book. Opening the cover, he found the first page inscribed simply, "For Liam, Nathan, and Gage, until you come home." The three brothers leaned in together, turning pages slowly. Each spread documented a year of their lives, the years they had missed. 7th birthday, photos of their empty bedroom preserved exactly as they had left it, 3 small wrapped presents sitting unopened on their beds. 10th birthday, letters Eva had written to each of them, never knowing if they would ever be read. 16th birthday, driver's licenses. Eva and Bill had mocked up, imagining what their sons might have looked like as teenagers. High school graduation, caps and gowns purchased but never worn, tassels preserved in plastic. On and on it went, through college years that never happened. 21st birthdays without celebration, imagined career paths, and life milestones, all lovingly documented in this book of shadow lives, the lives they should have lived. By the time they reached the final page, their 36th birthday, marked just months before they were found, there wasn't a dry eye among them. "You never forgot us," Nathan whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Not for one day," Bill confirmed, his arm around Eva's shoulders. Liam looked up, his eyes shining with tears. "We had no idea. All these years, we thought no one was looking for us, that no one cared." "We never stopped looking," Eva said fiercely, "never stopped hoping." Gage, who had been silently absorbing every page, finally spoke. "I want to remember," he said quietly. "I want to remember everything about before, but it's like trying to catch smoke with my hands. The memories are there, but they slip away when I reach for them." Ava moved to sit beside him, hesitating only briefly before taking his hand in hers. "We have time now," she said gently, "time to make new memories, and maybe as we do, the old ones will find their way back." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "I dreamed about this house last night," he admitted. "Not that I knew it was this house. But I was in a yellow room with dinosaur stickers on the ceiling. When I woke up, I could almost smell something, like cinnamon and apples." "Your bedroom," Bill said, his voice catching. "And Eva's apple pie. It was your favorite. You'd eat it for breakfast if we let you." "I still love apple pie," Nathan said, looking surprised at his own revelation. "Some things never change," Ava smiled through her tears. Liam, who had been quieter than usual, suddenly stood. "I need to ask something," he said, his voice serious. "Something I've been afraid to bring up." The others looked at him expectantly, concern shadowing their faces. "What happens when this is over? When the trial ends? When the media loses interest? When the story isn't new anymore? What happens to us then?" The question hung in the air, giving voice to fears they had all harbored but not expressed. Bill was the first to respond, rising to stand eye to eye with his eldest son. "Then we continue. We learn how to be a family again, day by day. It won't be easy. There will be setbacks, disagreements, times when the gap feels too wide to cross. But we'll keep trying. That's what families do." Eva joined them, bringing Nathan and Gage with her. For the first time since their reunion, the five Marlowes embraced without hesitation, without the awkwardness of strangers, but with the determined grip of a family that had endured the unimaginable and emerged intact. "We have a second chance," Eva whispered, her arms stretched to encircle as much of her family as she could reach. "Not many people get that in this life. We won't waste it." As night fell over the Texas countryside, they remained together on the porch, sharing stories both painful and precious, beginning the long process of weaving their separate lives back into a single tapestry. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of hesitation, flashes of the strangers they had been to each other just weeks before, but it was a beginning. And after 30 years of endings, a beginning was everything. The courtroom fell silent as Henry Foster was led in, shackled and wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to drain what little color remained in his aged face. At 70, he looked far older, the past month in custody having stripped away the veneer of the respected community figure he had pretended to be for decades. Ava sat rigidly in the front row, Bill's hand clasped tightly in hers. Behind them, a sea of family members, friends, and supporters filled every available seat. Conspicuously absent were Liam, Nathan, and Gage. They had chosen not to attend this preliminary hearing, a decision both Eva and Bill fully supported. The charges read like a litany of horrors: 3 counts of kidnapping, multiple counts of child abuse, false imprisonment, identity fraud, psychological torture, and now, with the discovery of remains on his property, 4 counts of murder in the first degree. As the judge denied bail and set a trial date 6 months away, Eva studied the man who had stolen her children, really looked at him for the first time. Not the benevolent teacher she had once trusted with her precious boys, but the monster hiding behind that carefully constructed facade. Foster's eyes met hers briefly across the courtroom. There was no remorse there, no acknowledgement of the lives he had destroyed, only a cold calculation, as if even now he was planning his next move. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, hungry for comments from the family at the center of the case that had captivated the nation. Detective Martin expertly guided Eva and Bill through the crowd to a waiting car. "The district attorney wants to meet with you," he explained once they were safely inside the vehicle. "And with your sons. The case against Foster is strong, but your family's testimony will be crucial, especially regarding the psychological manipulation." Bill sighed heavily. "They've been through enough, Martin." The idea of them having to relive it all on the stand with Foster sitting there watching. "I understand your concerns," Martin said, "but without their testimony, there's a chance, a small one, but still a chance, that Foster could avoid the most serious charges. And there are still those other families, the ones whose children didn't survive. They deserve justice too." David nodded slowly. "We'll discuss it with the boys, and with Dr. Sanders. They're making progress, but it's fragile. This could set them back." Back at home, they found the 3 brothers in the backyard, engaged in the unlikely task of building a treehouse. Liam was up in the old oak, hammering boards into place. Nathan handed materials up from below, while Gage sketched designs on a pad balanced on his knee. "What's all this?" Bill asked, unable to keep the smile from his voice. Nathan turned, wiping sweat from his brow. "We found your old plans in the garage, from 1981. You were going to build this for us that summer." Bill's eyes widened in recognition. "I'd forgotten all about that. Had the lumber delivered the week before you disappeared. I couldn't bear to return it, but I couldn't build it either. It sat in the garage for years until I finally donated it." "Well, we thought it was time," Liam called down from his perch in the tree. 30 years late, but better than never." Ava watched them work, these grown men building a children's treehouse, and understood the healing that was happening before her eyes. They were reclaiming something stolen, creating a physical manifestation of the childhood they should have had. That evening, gathered around the dinner table, Eva and Bill broached the subject of the upcoming trial. The mood shifted immediately, the relaxed atmosphere of the afternoon replaced by palpable tension. "We don't want to pressure you," Eva assured them. "If you're not ready to testify, no one will force you." Liam, always the first to speak, shook his head. "It's not about being ready, it's about facing him. All these years, he was our savior, the man who rescued us from our criminal parents. Even knowing the truth now, there's this conditioning, this automatic response of gratitude and fear." "Stockholm Syndrome," Nathan added quietly. "That's what Dr. Sanders calls it. And she says it might never completely go away." Gage, who had been silently moving food around his plate, finally looked up. "I'll testify," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "Not just for us, but for the others, the ones who didn't survive. Someone needs to speak for them." His brothers exchanged a look, years of unspoken communication passing between them in an instant. "We're with you," Liam decided, Nathan nodding in agreement. "All three of us. Together." Bill reached across the table, grasping Gage's hand. "You're sure it won't be easy?" "Nothing about this is easy," Gage replied with a sad smile. "But necessary things rarely are." The conversation shifted to practical matters. What to expect in court, how to prepare, the support systems that would be in place. As they talked, Eva noticed Gage becoming increasingly withdrawn, his earlier resolve seeming to waver. Later that night, unable to sleep, she found him sitting alone on the porch swing, sketchbook open on his lap. He was drawing the old oak tree in the backyard, the half-built tree house perched in its branches, illuminated by moonlight. "It's beautiful," Eva said softly, settling beside him on the swing. Gage nodded his thanks but continued drawing in silence. "Something's troubling you," she observed after a while. "More than the trial." He hesitated, pencil hovering over the page. "I keep thinking about the kids at the estate," he finally admitted. "The ones who were there when the police came. I was responsible for them. They trusted me. And now they're scattered in the system, probably scared and confused." Eva realized with a start that this was the first time any of her sons had expressed concern about the children from Foster's estate. It made sense that it would be Gage. He had worked most closely with them, been their caretaker and teacher. "You cared about them," she said simply. "I did. I do." Gage set down his pencil. "Foster was cruel to us, especially when we were young. But as we got older, things changed. He gave us responsibilities, trusted us with important tasks. I really believed we were doing good work, helping children who had no one else." "And in many ways you were," Eva assured him. "Detective Martin says the children speak very highly of you. You protected them as best you could within a terrible situation." Gage looked at her, vulnerability plain on his face. "What if I want to keep doing that? Helping children, I mean. Not like Foster, but legitimately. I have a degree in early childhood education. Foster arranged it through an online program. It's one of the few real things about my life before." Eva felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. Pride that her son, despite everything, had developed such compassion. Sadness that she had missed watching this quality grow in him. "I think that would be wonderful," she said sincerely. "When all this is over, when you're ready, we can look into proper certification. You could make a real difference." For the first time since their reunion, Gage initiated physical contact, leaning against Eva's shoulder as they swung gently in the night air. It wasn't quite a hug, but it was a beginning, another small step on the long road ahead. "Mom," he said, testing the word carefully. It was the first time he had called her that since they found each other. "I'm trying to remember, but I'm also trying to move forward. Is that okay?" Eva's heart swelled, tears pricking her eyes. "That's more than okay," she whispered. "That's exactly right." Inside of the house, Bill stood at the window, watching his wife and youngest son sitting together on the porch swing. Behind him, Liam and Nathan argued good-naturedly over a board game, their voices filling the living room with the ordinary sounds of family life. It wasn't the life they had expected. Not the one cruelly interrupted 30 years ago, nor the false existence crafted by a madman's obsession. It was something new, fragile but growing stronger each day. A family reborn from the ashes of tragedy, finding its way forward one careful step at a time. Outside, the Texas stars shimmered above the half-built treehouse, a promise of childhoods reclaimed and futures yet to be written. The road ahead would not be easy, but they would walk it together, no longer lost, but finally, irrevocably found.